And I'll just say welcome back to another episode of What Does Mr. Penley Know and What Does He Not Know at this point. I appreciate y'all staying with me all of these times that we've held these coffees. I am going to give just a brief update sort of on the situation as we are. I noticed we've got some people joining us that haven't joined us in the past, so I am going to go back and do just a little bit of talking about some of the things I've talked about previously. And then like I try to normally do, I'll open it up for any questions and I'll try to provide as much clarification as I can. We are a pretty small group, so I'm going to stay pretty informal today. But just to recap for anybody who may have been asleep for the last week and a half, we are reopening Clark County schools as of November 9th for all students in grades K through 8, as well as all adapted or LID special ed students at the high school level, as well as some other special populations of high school students. At this point, parents have been given the opportunity to register their child for either face-to-face or virtual learning. And the deadline for that was Sunday for parents to make that selection in campus. I'll give you a little secret that they haven't turned that function off in campus yet. So if you want to go in and make any changes, or if you haven't registered yet and you'd still like to, you are still able to do that at this point. I was told at a meeting this morning that they are going to shut that function off for parents at the end of today so that they can start pulling hard numbers for schools tomorrow. At the school level, we still can go in and make those notations in campus. And so if you are planning on doing it and you haven't done it yet and you forget to do it tonight, you're welcome to give the school a call tomorrow and we can make that choice for you in campus. As of today, and actually as of about 5 minutes ago, we have a school population of right around 750 all total. We have 284 students who at this point have opted to stay online. We've got 307 students who have opted to come back face-to-face, and we've got about 150 students who haven't responded yet. One of the really interesting things about the pattern of students who are choosing to remain virtual and the pattern of students returning back to school in person is that there is zero pattern. You'll notice those numbers are real similar. We've got 300 coming back in person and 300 staying online. When you drill down into those numbers, it is equal across programs. So we've got about 50-50 gifted students coming back, staying online. We've got about 50-50 special ed students coming back versus staying online. The same is true across pretty much all demographics. It's true across boys and girls, and it's true across all 3 of our grade levels. If anything, our 8th graders are a little heavier on the staying in person side, but just by, I mean, less than 5%, like not even a significant number. So it's been a really interesting pattern to me to see that sort of the struggle with deciding whether to send children back is we're split as a society, as a community. There's no factor that sort of indicates whether someone would come back in person versus whether they would stay online. So that was just, I don't know if anybody's interested in that, but that was a really interesting pattern for me. As far as the school's planning, we have been given a level of freedom to select a model. You notice my language has changed just a little bit from the language that I used last week in these principals coffees. We were told that we can select our own model for in-person and online instruction, whether we're asking teachers to teach both of those things simultaneously, whether we're asking teachers to teach 2 sections of in-person classes and then separately teach 2 sections of online classes, or whether we are going to assign some teachers to teach fully online classes and other teachers to teach fully in-person classes. That decision is ours to make, but there are some caveats within that we found out this morning. One of them is that our human resources department, and I give them a lot of credit for really, really pushing and trying to make this happen, even though it does make some of our planning a little more complicated, is they've said they are doing everything within their power to provide accommodation for teachers who are in very high risk categories in terms of allowing them to be online teachers. And I think that's a really great thing in terms of being teacher friendly. The challenge that poses is that if I'm told at Clark Middle School that we need to take in teachers from other schools who are in high risk categories, that makes it very difficult for us to plan our model and really sort of boxes us into certain models depending on how many teachers we're given. I'm a little bit concerned that that's going to happen. At the meeting I was at this morning, Clark Middle does have a higher proportion of students currently remaining online than any of our other schools, though the other schools have much higher proportions of online students than any of them were expecting. So right now we're at 50% of our respondents have responded staying online, and we're at about 40% or 42% of our full school population who've decided to stay online. The other schools are at about 30 to 35% of their full school populations have decided to stay online. Right now, We have not yet made our model decision because we're waiting for human resources to tell us tomorrow whether we're having to accommodate any of our teachers at Clark Middle or any other middle school teachers across the district who qualify for family medical leave that we might be able to accommodate by providing an online position for them. And so as we're prioritizing our decision around the models, that because that's a legal requirement for us, that's sort of our top priority, is making those accommodations. And then after that, our two priorities that we're looking at about equally are maintaining small class sizes and then maintaining the relationships that students have already formed with their teachers and trying to change as few teachers and student schedules as possible. Last week, all of the parent coffees that I held, as well as a lot of the feedback that I got from my teachers, is hey, we worked really hard to connect with our communities, our classroom communities and our school communities while we've been online, and to restart that from scratch with a new group of kids, and for kids to restart that with a new group of teachers would be hard at best and traumatizing at worst for some kids who really just, they form that latched on relationship with their teachers. And so we're prioritizing that as we make our decision on our model. I'll say outright, I don't think it's going to be possible for us to schedule without changing some student schedules, but we are prioritizing changing as few as possible. The other new information that we've gotten at this point is they have given us our start and end time. So we know that our school day, based on the transportation's department's capacity to deliver elementary school students to their schools and then run their middle school routes, as well as to separate some routes that require multiple routes. Our school day is going to run 8:45 to 3:45. So our first academic class will start at 8:45 and we will dismiss like we always have at 3:45. Buses will begin dropping off and our doors will open for car riders as well at 8:10. And our drop-off period will be between 8:10 and 8:30. And at that point, students will be able to get breakfast and go to their classrooms. We are not going to be accommodating early arrival this year. In the past, we've opened up our gym for basketball, our media center for reading and gaming, and our front hallway for socializing as early as 7:30 and 7:25. We do not have the staff capacity to monitor that and to maintain social distance. Anyone who's walked into our building during early arrival will know that it's a conglomerate of kids sort of everywhere that we do our best to monitor and keep safe as we're waiting for school to start, but with the additional guidelines for social distancing, for mask wearing, for not congregating in large areas, we're not going to be able to accommodate that this year. And then I guess the final update that I have is we have really started looking pretty diligently at our health and safety guidelines. We're starting to look at how we are planning to organize classrooms, how we're organizing some of our larger spaces like the gym, our art room, how our band and orchestra classes will be run, and the different signage and protocols that we'll need for students as we work to keep them safe. One of the things that I think is really important to say, and this has really hit home for me today because I've been working on what the district is calling a playbook. It's kind of like our handbook for reentering school. Is school's going to feel a lot stricter for kids. I think my teachers are still staying real open and they're real restorative and they don't want it to feel strict, but just in terms of all of the different policies and protocols we have to have in place to keep kids safe, even just at the basic of mask wearing and staying in the space that you're supposed to stay in. Those are things that we've typically been real loose with kids on. We've allowed a lot of flexibility for students. We've allowed a lot of accommodation for students, and things that are as simple as lining up to use a water fill station are going to have some guidelines that students are going to have to follow. And so my big concern right now is that as students enter, we want to welcome them back and we want them to feel like we love them and want them back in our building. And simultaneously to making them feel that way, we're also going to have to impress upon them the importance of, acting in ways that keep our school community safe. And so I don't have a good solution to that other than we are going to say both of those things. The first full week that students are back, we're going to say it a lot. We're glad you're here. We're welcoming you here. We're excited to see you in person. We've missed you for the 8 months that we've been away from you, but we also have to work together to stay safe here at Clark Middle, and here are the ways that you have to do that. And so we are down to every sort of minute of the day, we're looking at the protocols that we're going to have for entering the building, for getting breakfast, for going to homerooms, the protocols we're going to have for transitioning students, the protocols we're going to have for very special spaces in the building, and then the protocols we're going to have for dismissing students to their buses and to the car rider lanes. There's going to be a lot of very strict rules that go along with those things. I thought that was the last thing. That was not the last thing. The other update that I've got is that my scheduling team met and has put a lot of long, hard, thoughtful hours into really analyzing what we're capable of doing, what's best for kids, and what meets all of the requirements for social distancing. And at this point, it is certain that we will not be able to cohort at a classroom level. My initial thought as we first thought about coming back to school was, hey, if we can keep kids in the same room, we'll transition our teachers, and that's how we'll minimize the exposure that students have. That is just absolutely not possible given the complexities of middle school scheduling. And so we've taken one step up from that, and we're looking at ways that we can cohort students at the team level so that a team of students, and right now, based on the numbers that are enrolling in person, a team of students is going to be around 50 to 60. And so we would transition 50 to 60 students in the hallway at a time, with each team transitioning differently. And if we utilize the whole hall, while we can't maintain 6 full feet of distance, we can maintain about 1.5 meters, which is what the current European guidelines are coming out of Spain. And so that's just the best that we can do right at this point. The other distancing things that we're sort of coming to realize right now is that our ability to social distance within the classroom is heavily dependent on the model that we choose for instruction. And this is, again, where I go back to that idea that we have to either prioritize safety or we have to prioritize instructional efficacy. And it's hard to figure out where that balance is. If we ask teachers to teach that simultaneous model, meaning they're teaching in-person and online students simultaneously, our class sizes will be pretty small. They'll, for the most part, be below 10. When we start to reorganize and re-cohort students to use the segmented model, so I'll use Ms. Draper as an example since she's with us, the way that the data is playing out, she's got enough students currently requesting to stay online that we could reschedule, have her teach her 5th period as an online only class. All of her other classes would be in-person classes, but all of those in-person classes would still be between 15. And I think we're capped at about 18 right now, but it would be possible to go up to 20. I know that was getting a lot into sort of the minutia of scheduling, so I'm sorry. I just realized this is the wrong audience for that. I'm hitting like hour 10 of Zooms today, and so please, I hope you'll give me a little bit of grace and that my brain's not working as well as I would really ideally like it to. And so I've talked about the reopening. I've talked about our model selection, our numbers, our school day, early arrivals, safety guidelines, and the cohorting model. That's really all the update I have right now. My leadership team is meeting tomorrow, and we've set our deadline that after we get that information from Human Resources about whether we're going to accommodate any FMLA teachers as online teachers at Clark Middle, we've told ourselves we're sort of locking ourselves in the room. I guess that's not for real. We're locking ourselves in the Zoom until we come out with a decision about the model that we're going to use. And then my scheduling team meets right after that on Friday to start operationalizing whatever decision is made by our leadership team tomorrow. I'll say the early indicators are looking like we are going to absolutely have to use a mix of models, that we're not going to be able to have one single model that works for the entire building, specifically when we look at our connections classes and some of our classes that only have a single section. But right now, our team is looking pretty heavily at the segmented model that I just described, where Ms. Draper might teach a couple of sections of in-person and a couple of sections online, and we're balancing that against the simultaneous model. And it was really sort of surprising to me because I'm really dead set against the simultaneous model just based on feedback I've got from other counties. I had some of our leadership team bring up some really important differences in the way that we've approached online learning that they feel like might lend itself to the simultaneous model. But ultimately, I'm going to lean on my teachers and my leadership team tomorrow to help us make that decision. So there was 12 minutes of Mr. Pinley talking. And there is everybody's yay time for today. And I'll just sort of pause there and see if there are questions or other things that you'd like me to expand on. And you're welcome. We're a small enough group if you just want to unmute and ask, but you're also welcome to go into the chat and type your question in.
Mr. Pinley, can I just ask a question on the last part that you were talking about?
Sure.
When you say you'll probably have a mix with the connections, do you mean like a mix? Some are going to be segmented and some are going to be simultaneous? Is that the mix that you're talking about?
Yes, depending on the numbers that we have enrolled in a course. And so like the challenge is that for our core classes, in grade levels, everything's sort of separated equitably. Once we get into connections, because kids have choice about what they take, it's no longer segmented equitably. And so if I've got a class that has the majority of students opting for online and just a handful for in-person, I might move the in-person students to a different class and make that a segmented model. Whereas if I've got a class where I'm only offering one section of it or two sections of it at a grade level, and it's evenly split, we might have to do that through the simultaneous model. And a lot of it does come down to the numbers of students and what connections courses they've registered for.
Yes, Mr. Pendley. Actually, I have one question. Like, if administration decide to change the teacher actually during like virtual session or like in-person session, and in the case if any student have the problem to understand like the change teacher, so will they have the opportunity to get connected with their original teacher or not?
At this point, because we're having to accommodate so many different factors as we look at the scheduling, there will be very little room for movement once we've created the schedules. We are working really hard to change as few schedules as possible. That my scheduling team has committed to making that one of their priorities. I'm hesitant to say that we'll be able to do it for 100% of our students at this point.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Sure.
So you had mentioned in one of the previous meetings that when the kids come back, they're going to have ELT again. Is that correct?
I'm hoping so. The protocols that we got today for some of our sanitization and some of our lunch procedures are going to require some pretty elongated transitions. And so that's going to require us to go back and relook at our master bell schedule. And if we've got to take time from somewhere in order to provide enough time for students to follow those protocols, the only place that we really have to pull it from is that ELT time. And so right now it's just, we haven't put together our master schedule yet because it's dependent a lot on the models that we choose. And so I'm hoping to keep an ELT period, but I'm not completely certain we'll be able to do it.
Will that extend for both online and in person?
We are trying to match up our online and our in-person schedules, just in the case that we do have to use a mix of models. So if we do have some students working simultaneously with a teacher, with students in the building, those schedules have to match. And so while I don't know that we would assign students ELT additional work, I think that would be an opportunity for our students who are working online to check their Google Classrooms, to catch up on their asynchronous work session period. I don't think we would assign new things for our online students for that. And I know y'all are always really kind to me, but really, like, we're starting to get to the end of the time, and school is starting on November 9th. So please feel free to ask hard questions, and please feel free to press me so that I know what I need to go back to our district folks who are helping us make our plans, what I need to go back and say are concerns or questions that I'm not able to answer properly. I've seen the Facebook posts. I know there's a lot of anxiety. I know there's even some anger and things out there in our community. So please feel free to, I've got a thick skin. I can take those things.
Well, for what it's worth, I just wanted to come to the meeting just to kind of, I don't know, just let you know that we're here for you. And like, I mean, I don't know what to do because I don't know, we've never been in this before. So we're literally like fixing the boat as we're driving it, I guess, whatever that metaphor is. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I thank you for everything you're doing. And I mean, I would love to offer some assistance. I don't know what I could possibly be useful for, but yeah, I you know, one question I had as you're talking, so if you have like 150 kids that you haven't heard from them one way or the other, I guess, is there a point where you're just like, all right, I guess we're going to send the buses out on the 9th and hope that they show up? I mean, are they kids that you know have been checking in and you know that they're around anyway?
So a small portion of the students who haven't responded yet are also the students that we have really struggled to connect with during distance learning. We have a very small group. I want to say the in size is less than 15 that we're struggling to get to connect regularly. And so that's within that group. And then what the district has said is that anyone who hasn't registered, they said by last Sunday, but the registration is still open now. Anyone who hasn't registered by whenever they cut it off will automatically default into in-person instruction. The caveat and the challenge there is that you also had to say that you needed transportation. And so if you don't have a bus stop stopping close to where you live, you might not have transportation in those first days if you didn't register. I've had my family engagement specialist, my counseling team, and pretty much any supplemental staff who's not teaching, they've been calling one-on-one all the families that haven't responded so far. And so we're steadily chipping away. We can make contact with about 50 families a day, and we're going to continue to do that through the rest of this week as well, in the hopes that by Friday we get to 100% of our families. I am not sure yet at this point, and this was a question that came up in another context that another principal asked that we haven't gotten clarification on, is if a parent did not respond to the survey and they get defaulted into in-person, are they then able to choose to stay online? And I have not, or are they forced to come to school? And I haven't gotten a response to that yet. I do appreciate, though, the kind words and the offer of assistance. We are, I'm proud of the work that our team has done. If there's anything that parents and kids can do right now is send an email of appreciation to your teacher. Tell kids to show up on the first day with their masks on, but the smile behind their eyes, so that kids know they're excited to be here. I know my teachers right now, and Ms. Draper or Ms. Neal or anybody else or Dr. Murphy, y'all can feel free to talk on behalf of teachers. They're pretty tired already. Like, we worked really hard to make our online instruction work well, to contact our families, to do all the things we needed to do to make that successful. I feel like it was successful. And there's a big feeling like we're starting over right now. And it's just a challenge for teachers to go back and feel like we're starting over from scratch. We're going to do it. We're going to be smiling when we greet kids on November 9th. We're going to have good instruction, both online and in person. But it's going to be a heavy lift for teachers, and any kind words you can send to them would be well appreciated. This may be my fastest principal's coffee yet.
Here, let me see. I'll ask a question. And I'll echo. Thank you, Barry. Like, you've been awesome about communicating and being giving us as much information as you have. So I really appreciate that. I just had a question. You know, with numbers going up nationally, possibly locally, has there been any talk about pivoting? You know, any talk of like how they would respond to numbers increasing, but too much between now and November 9th of COVID?
I've asked that question twice in the last 24 hours, and I get sort of the tagline response every time, which I think is appropriate, that the district intends to continue monitoring the data in our area and will make decisions based on the data that we see. I asked specifically if there was going to be a metric that would guide a return to fully online instruction, and was told specifically today that no, there is not a specific metric that the district is using currently. I'll say if you do monitor the data regularly, we dropped dramatically right at the middle of September. We use a 2-week rolling average, and we look at cases per 100,000 and the overall positivity rate. Our cases per 100,000 has increased. We had dropped into the very low 200s when the decision was made to come back to school, knowing that our ultimate target was to be in the 150 to 175 per 100,000 range. Over the last couple of weeks, we're back at 250 cases per 100,000, and the trend seems like it's pointing up again. I think our positivity rate had dropped from well above whatever, it was so astronomical, I can't even remember what it was when the students first came back. It had dropped to 5%. It had dropped again into the mid 3s. The last I checked, and I think they posted a report on Monday, we were at 4.7 as an overall positivity rate for the county. One of the things they're trying to take into consideration as they look at the data is also trying to disaggregate the UGA data from the Clark County data, and try to have a better idea of whether our communities really do overlap CCSD and UGA, or whether we're seeing that as an overlap and it's really two separate people. I have my own feelings about that, but I'm not a medical professional, and so I'm trying not to speak out of my lane.
Right, yeah.
So I guess the shorter answer to that was
yeah.
no.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, yeah. How much? Yeah, figuring out what all the numbers mean is Well, and yeah, so, and with that, so you're saying they are monitoring, we'll, yeah, see what happens with that, I guess is.
And I have a lot of faith in Nurse Roark. She
Yeah, me
is
too.
a metric-minded person. I'm sure that in her brain she has a metric. I think, and here this is Mr. Pinley editorializing. So please, nobody go post this on Facebook, because this is like God's truth from the district. I think it's sort of like a struggle between a metric and trying to serve our community. And so whereas Nurse Roark has a number in the back of her head that's going to cause alarms to go off, and she's going to start advocating for a change, I think there's a little bit of fear to publish one, because then we hit that number. And if there's other information that indicates, no, we've been back and it's safe, and while the number in our community is going up, our school cases are safe, I think they're just hesitant to publish a number for that reason. They want to maintain some flexibility in decision making. That's me guessing and speculating though.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, actually.
Ms. Griffith has asked if a student tests positive but doesn't have symptoms, will be able to go from face-to-face to online while in quarantine. Yes, we do intend to provide instructional services for students if they are forced to go into quarantine, as long as they are well enough to participate in that instruction and they're not showing symptoms and are actively sick. The other, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Are you sure?
Actually, can I go back to one thing, because it's related to the
you sure
things
can.
we talked about? Just because it is somewhat related, I would, if you're looking for something to advocate for and you're like, where's the hill I want to die on in terms of the posts I do put on Facebook and the letters I do send to my board member and all that sort of stuff, I do think it's worth starting to explore. If they're not going to say there's a metric that would cause us to go back into full virtual learning, is there at least a metric that would allow parents to opt back out of in-person? So like, parents have made this decision based on data from mid-September, based on the trajectory of the data. And if all of a sudden we jump from 300 to 700 cases per 100,000 because, you know, for whatever super spreader event there is, that might be a place where parents should consider advocating for yourselves about having some choice remaining. Dr. Murphy, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. You've probably said this in other meetings I'm in, and I'm sorry, my brain can only take in so much new information at once. What are they saying right now about when a class or classmates would need to be quarantined if they were near a child? Is it the 6'+1" metric, or like, how are they deciding that? And how do you know if it's going to be publicized, you know, the testing?
Yes, and so DPH's guidelines are 6 feet for 15 minutes or within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more counts as close contact, and we would require a 14-day quarantine for anybody who met that criteria and was in contact with a positive case. What we are trying to do at the school level goes back to those cohorting models in terms of how do we minimize the number of students who are impacted by that. And so in classrooms where class sizes allow for desks to be 6 feet away from each other, we will absolutely do that. Where class sizes do not allow for us to do that, we've been advised to do cohorted tables. And so 4 students would sit together. We would make sure that those 4 students and their table or their desks together were 6 feet away from the other sets of 4 students in the room. And that way, if a positive case were to come out in that classroom, it wouldn't be the entire class that would have to quarantine. It would just be the 4 students who are sitting together.
Okay, and then that model also, those same 4 students would probably sit near each other in science and in math and in whatever, because they're cohorted, kind of like their own little pod.
I don't think we're going to be able to manage that level of cohorting. And so the positive case, and now I'm falling into the trap that I've just complained to my boss about the district falling into, is I'm thinking about everything through the lens of elementary, and it's not, it's different, it's middle. And so yes, Dr. Murphy's right. So if child A sits with children B, C, and D in first period, all children A, B, C, and D get quarantined. And then if in period 2, that child A is sitting with B and E and F are also going to have to quarantine too. And so all the students who were tabled with that child would end up having to be quarantined. And so for a typical middle school day, that could be from as small as 4 to as many as about 20 students who might have to quarantine given a single exposure, which is still lower than what a whole class would be in typical times if we had 30 kids in a room or 28 kids in a room. And that's a really good sort of way for me to talk about the fact that Nurse Roark, and I was in 2 meetings with her today. I count myself very fortunate for that. She talks a lot about mitigation versus elimination. We cannot eliminate risk. I tried to be real upfront about that from the beginning as parents have made their decisions. We're a public school with so many variables that are outside of our control. We cannot eliminate 100% of risk. The best we can do is choose the strategies that allow us to mitigate it. And so that would be the effect of our mitigation strategies. I hope that answered that question. The other thing that sort of brings to mind is seating charts. Middle schoolers really like to choose who they sit by, and in order for us to do appropriate contact tracing, teachers are going to have to create seating charts. Those seating charts are going to be housed centrally so that the minute that we have a positive case, we can immediately begin doing the contact tracing. We can immediately begin contacting parents. We can immediately begin going through all of the procedures that ultimately will minimize the number of students who are exposed. The flip side of that is that does create a much stricter environment than a lot of our students are used to. They're used to being able to say, I'd rather sit over here. I'd rather sit away from the air conditioning or what have you, or I'd rather be able to choose my own seat. And that's just, it's going to be a non-negotiable. And so that sort of speaks to the strictness that school is going to start to feel as students are coming back. What other questions do you have? Yeah, absolutely, Ms. Kane. If I walked away from our coffees last week with nothing else, it was the idea that the kids have already formed a connection to their teachers, and so we're going to do everything in our power to maintain those connections. We also realize it'll be a lot easier for our teachers to enforce these rules that we're going to ask them to enforce with students that have already gotten to know them and who they are, and so we're going to do the best we can. I don't want to keep people during dinner time, so I'll sort of pause for maybe another 60 seconds and see if there's other questions, and then we'll disband. And if anybody wants to stop and ask me maybe a question that's related just to your child or to your unique situation, I'll be more than happy to stick around for that as well. So funny trying to moderate wait time in a digital environment. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Again, I'll stick around for another few minutes. If anybody wants to stay and ask an individual question, you're welcome to. But otherwise, I hope you all have a good evening. If you haven't made your selection for your kid, please go ahead and do that. And I'll do this again on Friday morning. If we've got any new information by then, I'll be more than happy to share it. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Ms. Draper, for doing the waiting room.
I did want to ask one question.
Sure.
But not in this. So
Oh.
I don't know if you want to stop recording.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you.